Haggerty Classic Car TV.
Welcome everyone to Haggerty Classic Car TV. Now that spring is here, it's time to get your classic ready for the road. But before you do, Randy's here to give us some quick spring maintenance tips.
This is Randy from the shop. Today we're going to get a 67 Shelby out of storage, and I'd like to go over a few of the tips that I use. First, we're going to open the hood, and I'm going to do fluid level checks. We're going to check the brake fluid first, and we just want to look down inside here and just verify that we have fluid in the cylinder. If we don't have fluid, that obviously means we have a leak someplace, and we definitely want to address that, and at the very least, fill it back up. Next, we're going to check the power steering fluid. We got good fluid level on that. Engine oil happens to be right here next to it. Got good oil in there. Coolant is something that could leak out, especially if we have a dirty floor. You'd never see it over the course of the winter. So just removing the radiator cap, looking inside, verifying that we have coolant, verifying the level is full. We all know where the happy spot is. The last thing I want to check on would be the battery. Some batteries have removable caps, and we can actually check the acid level inside the battery. If it's low, we want to fill that up with distilled water. The thing about the battery is that always make sure that the battery is fully charged before we try starting it up in the spring. Sometimes what can happen is if the battery is really weak, it will short out the solenoid, and it could cause the car to continue cranking with a weak battery and cause damage. The last thing that we're going to check under here is the air filter. This one's an exposed air filter, which means we can actually see it. But on other cars, they can actually be encased inside of a housing. What we can have is mice or squirrels get in and make a nest around that. And if they chew a hole through the filter and we start it, we'll suck all that debris into the carburetor. So we just want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So after checking the air filter, we're going to look down in here and check the fan and the belts and any of the moving parts on the engine, just to make sure nothing hasn't fallen down inside here. So it all looks good in here to this time. So now that I've verified that everything looks good under the hood, I'm going to want to have a fire extinguisher handy, just in case. And let's go inside and see if it'll start up. One of the last things I'm going to do before I try to start it is pump the brake pedal. We definitely want to verify that we have brakes. They feel fine, so let's see if it'll run. Ooh. And when you're starting these for the first time, sometimes they don't start right up, so don't just crank and crank and crank. Do short little bursts on the starter. It's much easier on them. Okay, I was very fortunate this time. It started right up. I'm only going to let it run for just a few seconds, and I want to go back out now and verify that I have no fuel leaks. So what I'm going to look for is around the base of the carburetors, around any fuel lines. I have a fuel pump down here. That all looks good and dry. I'm going to come over to the other side. My fuel rail, my fuel lines, all my rubber hoses, everything looks good. I'm going to start the car now. I'm going to start letting it warm up, and then I'm going to do two more things while the car's idling and warming up. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the air pressure in the tires and make sure they're all up and ready to go. And the second thing would be to check all the lights, verify they work with the front. Tail light, left turn, right turn, brake lights, backup light. Headlights, high beams, marker light, left turn, right turn. All right. So now that we've verified that all our lights are working, everything under the hood looks good, the last thing I'd recommend is a very cautious road test to start with. You know, just a few miles of slow driving, swerving, do a couple circles, make sure everything's good, and then we're off for the summer.
Now it's time to get cozy and go for a ride in a cute Nash Metropolitan.
All right, I'm standing here with Earl Rubenstein, who's the curator at the Automobile Driving Museum, and we're next to this cute little 1958 Metropolitan. Now, Earl, if you were to park this next to virtually any car that was made, especially by an American manufacturer in 1958, this would be, what, about half the size?
A third.
A third of the size. So
maybe even 25%. These are very small cars, and they were made in England with an Austin engine in them. And this was American Motors' introduction to an economy car to compete against the Volkswagen, which was being brought in. Of course, they were way ahead of their time, just like the Crosley was way ahead of its time, which you don't even hear about Crosleys today. But these are still here, and people drive them and collect them, and they're quite a strong following with the clubs for the Metropolitan.
Okay, so the people at American Motors Corporation had the foresight to think that at some point here in the U.S. we're going to need economy cars
To match what they do in Europe. Because we have bigger streets, we have bigger cities, and we have bigger cars.
Mm-hmm.
And back in Europe, they had the littler streets and the littler cities, and they needed the small cars to drive. So this was going to be the competition to the Volkswagen and all the other cars being imported in the 50s.
One little fun fact about these cute little Metropolitans that I did not know and just learned is the doors are interchangeable. And if you take a look at them, they're the same from the front part to the rear, and you could literally mount this driver's door on the passenger side by changing the location of the hinges and then, of course, relocating the handle. So what were people's reactions when these hit the showroom?
They were cute, and that was about as far as it got. They didn't have room for the 4 kids in the back seat and the dog and all the groceries, and they weren't the station wagon that everybody wanted, after World War II to get in and take the whole family and go out. But they were what they meant to be, an economy car.
Okay.
And America wasn't ready for that at the time, but this was the inspiration for what happened later on.
Okay, so what's it like to drive one?
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's like driving this is like a smart car, except instead of the smart car being a little shorter and taller, this is a little lower and longer, but proportionally they're the same. And it does the same thing that the smart car does. It's a very economical car. It gets you 30, 35 miles to a gallon. And on the freeway, stay to the right because you can get crushed by the bigger cars, just like the smart car. Stay to the right, you can't keep up with the traffic.
Yeah, I can only just picture what it would have been like driving this in the late 50s or early 60s next to all the giant American cars. Well, as you can see, it has an amazingly short turning radius, and basically to sum it up, it's just like what Earl said. It's cute. You're certainly not going to win any drag races against any muscle car or sports car, but I can see what they were getting at. It maneuvers around town quite easily. It gets great fuel mileage, and it's easy to park.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of Hagerty Classic Car TV. As always, you can log on to hagerty.com/classiccartv for upcoming episodes and leave your comments below.